I'm going to give you my top 10 favorite foods for worms, part 3. And over the years of feeding worms, these 10 foods have really helped me out and helped out my worms. And so starting out with number 1 is going to be beans. And there's a lot of different beans out there. There's pole beans that they grow and they throw a bunch of beans at once on the ground or up on their bush, kind of like a tree almost. And then there's the climbing bean that's more of a vine. And there's also a bunch of other beans that, probably I can't even name all of them, but some of the good ones are just in general, if you're buying them from the store, would be like pinto beans or kidney beans. They're all going to be super nutritious and nutrient dense for your worms. And a lot of people, they'll cook beans and there'll be a lot of scraps left over. And so that's why it's a really good one and high up on the list. And so yeah, definitely feed your worms some beans. Number 2 on the list is going to be peas. Now, this one is one of my favorite plants to grow, although it is a little tricky timing it to grow. But peas, and when you put the peas in your pot and you go to cooking them, a lot of times the peas get left over and people don't eat all the peas. And but your worms, when you put it in your worm bin, they will disappear super fast. And they're an excellent food source for your worms, and a pretty cheap food, and one that's super nutritious and actually helps the soil if you're growing it, as it is a nitrogen fixer. And so, but it does take a lot of peas to grow enough to feed your worms, but definitely some store-bought peas would be a decent option for your worms. And like I said, eat a few peas and then put the rest for your worms. And coming in at number 3, and honestly, this is probably the best food you could ever feed your worms, and that's going to be lettuce. Now, lettuce is one of those foods that, to me, you can't make a good hamburger or a good taco or really anything without lettuce, and especially a side salad of lettuce. And the great thing about lettuce is, whether you grow it or get it from the store, they're pretty cheap. And a lot of times the lettuce will go bad, especially if you get like a head of lettuce and the core in the middle is not very tasty. And so that would be a great thing to give your worms, and it'll really boost the activity of your worm bin and really get them up top like in these videos and having a good time eating the lettuce, because it's very nutrient dense and it has a lot of water content. And so if you put enough lettuce, you wouldn't even have to water your worms. And number 4 is going to be broccoli. Now this one, it could be number 10, could be number 4, but broccoli is a good one because it is a leafy green, kind of like lettuce, but it is on the kind of in the same family as cabbage and kale. And so the worms aren't real big on cabbage. And so putting broccoli, if it's just 2 or 3 heads, no big deal. But if you put nothing but broccoli, you could run into problems. But every now and then, just like us, to eat some broccoli is going to be a good thing. And but you don't want to do like broccoli and cheese in your worm bins, because cheese is in the dairy family and the worms don't really like dairy. So but definitely try you a few heads of broccoli and watch your worms have a good time with it. Number 5 is going to be grass clippings. Now, as you can see, we have some grass clippings in our bins right here, and grass clippings is going to be one of those that's super cheap and readily available for most people. But definitely be careful after it rained, as there could be native worms that could get put in your bins. And so it's a little bit risky, but it's super cheap. And if you're just doing it at home and you don't mind a potential different worm species getting put in, you could definitely use grass clippings. Or you could go the route of growing your own wheatgrass pads and putting those in there if you were worried about it. And the wheatgrass would probably be a little bit more nutritious for your worms. And so with that being said, it would actually potentially make more cocoons and have just a healthier worm. And probably coming in at number 6 is going to be kale. And again, kind of like a leafy green, but it is a little different because it's part of the cruciferous family. And so it is like cabbage. And so, kind of like I said earlier, you don't want to put just a big old pile of kale in your bins because it might get a stinking. But if it's just, 2 or 3 or 4 leaves for a pound of worms, it'll be fine. And it'll also be very nutritious. And it's also one of those food scraps that tends to pile up as most people don't eat much kale. And a bonus tip for you, if you boil the kale or steam it, they'll actually eat it faster, and it'll be less chance of it souring and going bad for you in your bin. Coming in at number 7 is going to be radishes. Now, this is another brassica family plant, but one that, at least for us, we eat a decent amount of radishes, but after maybe 4 or 5 radishes, it's like, I don't really want any more. And so they end up going to the worms, and the radishes are very nutritious and they're very dense, kind of like a carrot. And so it's going to break down slowly in your worm bin. So if you do have some type of lettuce in there, that's going to go fast. Whereas if you feed them lettuce with radish, once the lettuce is gone, they'll be working on the radish as time goes on. And so definitely a good one for a slow release food. And number 8 is going to be tomato. And we grow a lot of tomatoes on our farm, and not all of them are winners, but most are. And in the rare cases that they didn't turn into a good tomato, we'll actually take those and turn them back to compost with the worms, and the worms eat them super fast. But you do have to be a little careful with the seeds because the seeds are small, and if you compost your tomato, it will actually get into the castings. And so we don't compost tomatoes personally, but we did it the past when we were at the hobby level, and disappeared super quick. But we don't waste too many tomatoes because they're one of our favorites. But you definitely don't want to fill up your bin with tomatoes because they are slightly acidic, and so you could mess up your worm bin with too much acidic foods with tomatoes. And so now we'll move on to peppers. Now, I'm not talking about stuff like habanero and scorpion peppers, as they're super spicy and they're actually part of the worst foods for worms. But what I am talking about is stuff like bell peppers, as they're very nutritious and they also break down decently slow, and they have a lot of water in them, and the worms love the water, and they also love fresh vegetables. And so it's going to be a great one to throw in there. But like the tomato, you're going to have to watch the seeds, or you could end up with some unwanted plants. And finishing it out with number 10, since you made it to the end, I'll give you a good tip. And that's going to be to make you some popsicles. And not the store-bought kind, as they're full of a bunch of stuff that your worms might not want. But I'm talking about like a homemade popsicle out of, let's say you made a watermelon popsicle and you blended it and then made it into an ice cube, and you were sick of them, didn't want them. That would be an excellent food source for your worms. Now, not so good in the wintertime, but it really doesn't matter, because even if it was 34 degrees out, the popsicle will melt over time. But the worms don't really like it that cold. And so, but in the summertime, like right now, it's July, it would be a great time to throw a few popsicles in the bin to cool them off. And not only that, they would get some fresh fruit water, and they would also get to eat the pulp that's left behind. And so definitely, if you haven't tried it yet, do you some popsicles. And if you were a hardcore serious worm farmer, you could even put a little molasses in a watermelon popsicle for them, and that would just probably be the best thing that you could ever feed your worm, in my opinion. Now, definitely don't underestimate worm chow, as that would be probably the ideal thing you could feed your worms, is a watermelon molasses popsicle with worm chow on top. Your worm bin would be looking very good, and your worms would be healthy. They would throw a lot of cocoons, and that's going to make great castings, as that's what we're doing it for, so we can grow good plants. So with that, thanks for watching, and see y'all next time.